Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. And I made a video that came out today about Mayor Eric Adams trying to bring in pro bono big law associates to work jobs for all the attorneys they're losing from New York City. And in it, I made some flippant comments about like New York City's attorneys being like on the verge of homelessness and needing roommates and everything else. And as I sit and think about it, I think people in most of the country and in most lines of work are going to say, that's BS. There's no way that's the case. I don't believe you. So called up a buddy of mine who is, in fact, an attorney who works for New York City. And he's an upper manager and no identifying information, or I'm not going to give his agency or anything like that. But he makes about $140K a year working for New York City. Now, I'm just going to go through the math of his life. He's carrying $260,000 in student loans. But good news is his student loan payments are capped to about $1,000 a month. He very, very, very much felt it was important to live alone. And for some reason, chose to live in Manhattan instead of one of the boroughs. So he's actually paying just under $5,000 a month for his apartment, which he's not actually happy with, but at least it's a one bedroom and he's my age. He's, I think 40, close to 40. And he's tired of having roommates, doesn't want to do it anymore. So he got himself a one bedroom in Manhattan, and I'm going to round it up to 5,000. It's close enough for the purpose of this video. So right off the bat, let's go over the math here. He's earning $140K a year. Before he buys food or anything else, his apartment and his student loan is $6,000 a month, roughly. So $72,000 a year. Right. Now let's add something else. That $140,000 a year he makes, it's triple taxed. Federal, New York State, and New York City income taxes. So he's taking that triple taxed $140,000 a year, right? It's pre-tax. Like that's $140,000 before it's taxed. And just to pay his student loan in his one bedroom, not very nice apartment, he's got an outlay of $72,000 a year. So that's his existence. He then has to go buy food in New York City. Not a cheap proposition. It's very expensive here. He does get, I think, a Metro card. The city doesn't actually provide his Metro card, but it gives him a Metro card, I believe, in a way that lets him avoid getting taxed on the money he spends on his Metro card. So he's got to get around the city. Ubers, routinely $20-$30 for a ride. Taxis about the same. Subways, I think, are like $3.75 now, $3.50. I'm not positive. I don't live there anymore. So we kind of just went over his finances as like a companion video to that video I put out today. Just give people an idea of how this is going down and why it's a bit silly. It both is and isn't silly when they say, oh, these attorneys don't want to come back to the office, so they're leaving. Yes, but that's not the whole story. These attorneys took their wages working for New York City. We'll use this guy as an example. He's 140 grand. And some of his coworkers earning the same amount, they went and moved to places where the cost of living is cheaper, where they can get a really nice house and like pay a mortgage of like $1,200 a month instead of the $5,000 a month he's paying, right? And when you say, hey, you have to come back to the office, what that means is those people have to move back to the city they can't afford to live in anymore, right? In my video, I say a lot of mean things about many of the city attorney offices, which are not things that I came up with. In fact, things that city attorneys have told me, right, about their own offices. But it's not like they're sad about going in and seeing their coworkers and putting out a suit. They're not refusing to return to work because they want to sit in their gym shorts and eat yogurt while they work. They're refusing to come to work because they can't afford to live in the city that they would have to live in to come into work every day because they're not paid enough, because the world has changed and the US dollar has experienced an inflationary event. And so $140,000 does not really afford them what they need to live as an adult in New York City. Yes, they can live with roommates, but how are they going to have a family? How are they going to have kids that they can afford? Right? Like, it's fine when you're in your 20s. We all know people in their 20s who love New York City. I've got a great roommate. I go, it's great. Right? And they can do that maybe even like 70, 80K. Right? There's certainly people in New York City living in the boroughs who make much less than that and they survive. But my point is, these attorneys, when they're like 40, they can't really afford to live without roommates. They can't afford to do the things that people in their 30s and 40s may want to do, like have a child, save for retirement, right? So when we try to mock them, not me, I'm not mocking them, for not wanting to return to work, it's important to have the context that the return to work is impossible. What you're saying when you're saying, no, you got to come back to the city to work as a city attorney, what they're hearing is, you would like me to do the impossible because you don't pay me enough to do that. I can't afford to do that and have a life that is like a real adult human life, right? So I think that's an important note to discuss. And people are gonna be like, oh, well, what about two family incomes? Okay. I mean, we're just only married people can be an attorney working for New York City government. That doesn't really make sense, right? But also, I mean, I guess you could get, you then need a bigger apartment, right? Like you're going to be spending more on that apartment because you're not going to want to be in a really tiny apartment with your spouse, right? Even if it is still one bedroom, it's going to be a bigger one bedroom generally. So that's not the easiest solution. I mean, I get it. There's people who can do it. I'm just saying it doesn't solve the problem. And I would almost say there's a familial status claim there. Like, oh, because I'm single, right? This hypothetical person is single. He's not a hypothetical person. He's a guy I know. He's single. And so he pays his rent alone. He doesn't share his rent with somebody because he really wants to live without roommates. If they're like, yeah, well, I guess the way we structure our pay, you just can't afford to live here, so you got to get fired. You're kind of saying, we're firing you because you don't want to have roommates or a spouse. It's not really a familial status claim as like voice it out, but like it's iffy. It's certainly iffy, right? Anyways, I just wanted to give some context here, provide an example of like how these jobs are not really, people can't afford to work them, essentially. And I hope it's useful. And I wish all of the New York City attorneys who are leaving a great deal of joy and success in their new gigs. You're going to do great. And I believe in you, and you're going to be happier wherever you are now. And you can always just visit New York City. It's always going to be here in some respects. Take care, everybody.